So welcome to Live Kabbalah and welcome to Tzfat. We're going to be talking about tonight the matter of hand, which is Rosh Hashana, which is the Jewish New Year. And of course, it's not just a Jewish New Year like we spoke about last week. We spoke about the aspect of Rosh Hashanah on one capacity being the head of the year, and everything is included within those 48 hours of Rosh Hashanah. Now we're going to touch upon a different aspect of Rosh Hashanah. So we're going to get right to it. So there's actually a contradiction in the timing of Rosh Hashanah. Because on the one hand, Rosh Hashanah means it's the beginning of the year, meaning it's a recreation of the world in a sense. And that happens not to be the case. It happens to be that Rosh Hashanah is not the birthday of the world, which is the way it's loosely defined. The birthday of the world. Hi, come on in. Rosh Hashanah is not the birthday of the world. It happens to be the birthday of man. Rosh Hashanah is actually welcome. Rosh Hashanah is actually the birthday of the world, technically speaking, was on the 25th day of Elul, which is happens to have been yesterday. So technically speaking, yesterday was the birthday of the world. So that's when the world was created, according to Talmudic sources, according to Kabbalistic sources. That is that's when the world was created. What about Rosh Hashanah? So Rosh Hashanah is the birthday of man. So let's understand this, and let's try to make sense of this a bit, because it actually doesn't make sense. We wanna refer to Rosh Hashanah as being the head of the year and also the birthday of the world, but yet it's the sixth day of the creation of the world. So how does that fit into this whole equation, and what could we learn from this? So there's a number of very, very important lessons and very practical lessons that we're going to take out of this right now. And then we're going to actually delve a little deeper into the Kabbalistic meaning behind these 2 days of the 25th day versus the first day of Tishrei, which is 6 days later, Rosh Hashanah, as we know it. So on the first day of creation, the 25th day of Elul, the world was created. That's kind of like the big bang of, in Bereshit, in Genesis right there. And then the world was created and everything is included within it. And then there's a division of everything that was created. So in other words, everything was created all at once, and then it became manifested each and every day. So there's a new manifestation on the second day, the heaven and the sun and the moon, right? And then the third day was the creation of the vegetation and plants, right? And flowers, etc. Right? And then the fourth day is the fish, and the fifth day is animals, and then and the sixth day is man. So what is it that makes the birthday of man the prime reason for creation? So the answer to that is that the whole intention of creation is to have a dwelling place for God in the lower worlds. And this is something that the Zohar speaks about. The Zohar asks, well, why was the world created? What was the underlying purpose of the creation of the world? And there's a number of answers, but the Zohar says that it's in order that he should be known, that we should know him in creation. And that's one answer. Another answer is that God's capacity of full capacity of creation should be manifested. So therefore, if it was just a creation, it was just a spiritual creation, right? Or it was just a creation that was just known to him, right? So then that wouldn't be a completion of God's full expression, so to speak. So that's the other answer of the Zohar, that God wanted, so to speak, to express himself within the world. And it's kind of like an artist that feels a desire to express themselves. They have like a talent, so to speak. So by God, obviously, it's kind of like, it's not so simple to understand this, because by God, he knows his talent and he knows what he is, right? Whereas if we have a talent, it's dormant by us until we express it. But by God, that's not the case. By God, it's expressed, right? It is. He knows it, although it's not expressed. So it's kind of like a bit of a difficult place. Like it's kind of difficult to understand this Zohar, right? So therefore, the other Zohar, which I mentioned before, which actually the Arizal brings out, is that God wants to be known in this lower world. And then there's another reason why God created the world, and this is brought out in the writings of the Alter Rebbe, the Baal Tanya, the author of the Tanya, and he says that God created the world because he had a desire to dwell down in this lower world. He had a desire to dwell down in this lower world. Just like if a person has a desire to do something, you don't know exactly where that comes from, but there's a need and there's a desire to do that. And by God had desire to dwell down in this lower world. That's what the Alter Rebbe, that's what the Baal Tanya says. So having said this, the only being that could fully express this knowledge of godliness is man. So up until the creation of man, we had a world, and we had a beautiful world. A world that was, as you said, it was created on the 25th day of Elul, and it's an incredible world, a pristine world. It's everything was in the way it was meant to be, and it's just a beautiful world. But it's not a world where God is known. God is expressed in every one of his creations, but that expression is not known. And it's only man that was finally created on the sixth day could finally understand, could finally meditate, could finally deeply contemplate the reason for creation. So therefore, we celebrate Rosh Hashana on the sixth day of creation and not the first day of creation, because the ultimate reason of creation is that there should be a knowledge of who the Creator is. And that is only expressed, as we said, when Adam and Eve were born, were created on that sixth day. So there's a very powerful lesson, couple of lessons that we could just really cull and really take out of this right here at this point. And the first lesson is that although we see the vastness of creation and the magnitude of creation, the truth is really not even known to the smartest scientists. What we know in science in terms of what's out there, what vastness of creation is, just like a tiny, tiny fraction of really what there is. But having said that, the whole purpose of this entire vastness of creation, I'm talking the galaxies and all the, right, what is in the deepest seas and what is in the smallest ants and families of ants, etc., right? And what is in the center of the world, all of that is all meant for man to understand why all of this was created. So So the first lesson that we could take out of this is that we are tiny, tiny beings. We are small beings in comparison to the vastness of the world around us. But although we are so small, we encapsulate the whole purpose of creation. And that says a lot, because when we look at the world around us, we could, or our lives in particular, we could become very disillusioned, and we could think that, you know what, there's only a small fraction of people that are quote unquote conscious people, connected people, good people, in comparison to what's going on in the world. People that are spiritual, people that are actually living and really expressing the inner dynamic, the inner reason for creation. Right? When we look at the news around us, I mean, the news, okay, maybe that's not so fair to bring as an example, but what do we see in the news? We just see, right? We just see darkness upon darkness. We become very, very disillusioned by all this. But it's important to note that although we're the few, and people and anybody that's learning and that's listening, that has a deeper consciousness and a deeper desire to learn and to further their learning, to further their spiritual growth, they're amongst the few so far in the vastness of creation, even within the vastness of humanity around us. But at the same time, although we are so few, although in the current state, the way there is, that's insignificant to the bigger picture, to the bigger reason of what it is that each and every one of us are doing when we become more spiritual, when we become more godlike, when we become more proactively good, when we study more Torah, when we study particular more inner Torah. What we do in that, although we are few currently, we are serving, right, the whole purpose really of existence, for God to be expressed. And a person should never look at the world around them and think, okay, what's going on? You know, everybody's doing this and I'm like doing that. That makes no sense. Let me just, it's not going to work. So let me say this, that Adam actually came back in a sense, in a, we won't call it a reincarnation really, but a new expression of Adam was Abraham. He was the first Jew, the first Hebrew. And Abraham, it says like this, it says that the world was created, that this is the creation of heaven and earth when it was created. Behi bara'am means when the world was created, and that actually spells the letters Avraham. So Avraham has within him the letters of creation, Behi bara'am, in the creation. So Avraham expressed that. And we know about the life of Avraham, that Avraham is actually called Avraham HaIvri, Avraham the Hebrew, which is very interesting. Avraham the Hebrew, what does that mean, Hebrew, actually? Hebrew is the language, right, that's spoken in Israel, that the Torah is written in, but what does Hebrew actually mean? Hebrew comes from the word Ever. Ever means the other side. And the reason is, Avram, he was called Avram the Hebrew, that the whole world was on one side and Avraham was on the other side. He was really the first rebel, but he was a rebel with a cause. And he went against the stream of everybody coming at him in this way, and Avram went the exact other way. Which, by the way, there's a custom to eat on Rosh Hashana, by the way, or at least to have it on the table of Rosh Hashana, a head of a fish. I mean, there's, right? So the idea of the head of a fish is that a fish, well, not all fish in particular, but certain fish, swim against the stream. And the idea is that we have to actually learn that. We have to learn that we need to sometimes swim against the stream of everybody that is doing one thing. And we're looking at our year, and in particular at the beginning of the year, the head of the year, and we may look at ourselves and what we're yearning for, what we're doing, and really what kind of year that we really want. We have to remember that although we may be the few for now, we have to be able to go against the stream. We have to not be afraid to go against the stream. That's something that Abraham did, and that's something that we have as an inheritance within us, right? To be able to go against all influences and all difficulties and all, right, other streams, etc. So that's lesson number one that we could right away extract. Lesson number two is on a more personal level. Now, within our particular lives, on a day-to-day level, we live the majority of our lives is actually involved in more mundane and materialistic existence, right? Unless somebody merits to study the Torah like the entire day, which may be a gift maybe for a certain amount of time that some people have, but it's not often a reality that's sustainable for a long amount of time. So the majority of people are actually living, more, even though they're spiritually oriented, the majority of their day is involved in work, is involved in eating and drinking and, errands and driving kids to places and shopping, etc., etc. So we may look at, well, we're only devoting an hour a day maybe, or a half hour to maybe of prayer, or 10 minutes of prayer during the day, and 10 minutes of learning. And maybe once a week where we have the time to study, and we make time from our busy schedules to kind of like focus in and on something spiritual, and to take that in. But that, in comparison to the rest of our day and to the rest of our week, is actually very small. So we have to remember that this lesson, that the Rosh Hashana is the birthday of man. And that means that although we have the vastness of all of creation beforehand, but all of creation is really just kind of like feeding into and setting up man with all of the physical needs, so man could do what he could do within those few hours, let's say, of the day, or few hours even of the week. But what he or she does during that time is not insignificant at all in the bigger picture. And in fact, that hour of the day is the most important hour of the entire day, because that's really the innermost reason of the creation of that day. And the person really utilizes that day to the utmost by manifesting its innate spirituality. So this is very, very important, two lessons to really take heed of that on this Rosh Hashanah, because we could sometimes just come into the day and be like, well, what have I really done? And what's going on really in the world around us, etc., etc. We have to like strengthen ourselves, and we have to realize that even the small things that we do is very, very important. And we shouldn't negate it at all. And we shouldn't say, well, what are we really doing? We should strengthen it and maybe see how we could increase it during the next year, the subsequent year. So, and also we need to remember that we need to be like steadfast in what we're doing, although the whole world is maybe doing something completely different, and all of our friends are doing different things, and our family members are maybe doing something else, and everybody's doing other things, and here we are, we're maybe talking about, about this spiritual matters. But the truth is that, first of all, we don't need to be influenced, like we said before, but not only that, but we actually could have an effect on others by positively imparting to them, right, certain like nuggets of information, nuggets of like thoughts, right, not imposing things on anybody, because people need to come to spirituality. People need to come to their place of where they need to come to, sort of like on their own. But when we give little nuggets to these people, so then that's kind of like a little spark of light that within like their whole mind's thought, it may just be a certain trigger that may completely trigger their entire way of thinking. So we never know. Okay, so those are these two lessons about Rosh Hashanah. So now we're going to go a little bit deeper into this concept. So, as we said, the world was created on the 25th day of Elul. And the 25th day corresponds to 25 in Hebrew numerology, corresponds to Ko. Ko means like this. That's what it means in modern Hebrew and biblical Hebrew as well. Ko, like actually the prophets, in many of the books of in the Bible, they say that so said the Lord, or so said. So the word for that in Hebrew is ko, right? Ko, kaf and hey. Versus on Rosh Hashanah, on the day of the creation of man, we say in our machzor, in our prayer service, we say ze hayom tchilas masach. We say ze. Ze means this. So what's the difference between ko and ze? So it's interesting that the difference is that, as we said, ko is the way God communicated to the prophets, versus the word ze is the way God communicated to Moses, where he says ze hadavar, this is the matter. And what's the difference between ko and ze? So it's explained that the difference is a clear vision versus a hazy vision. And the vision of the prophets versus the vision of Moses, is that the prophets got a vision from God, but that vision was hazy. So they kind of like got an idea that this is what God wants of them, and I don't know, because I've never experienced prophecy, but the Maimonides says that it was hazy, and they got kind of like the idea of what they need to do, and they transmitted that to the people. Whereas by Moses, it was not hazy at all. It was just clarity, just 100% clarity. They just got Moses just said, "Oh, this is what God told me to do." Boom, that's it. So there was a complete clarity. And this is, of course, very, very important in our understanding of these 2 days of the creation of the world versus the creation of man, because the creation of the world is hazy. It's not so clear why the world was created, okay? And the world was created, the Mishnah says, that the world was created in 10 utterances. And those 10 utterances correspond to the 10 sfirot, right? They correspond to the 10 emanations. but then the ultimate reason, and like we said before, the manifestation of these 10 utterances are finally expressed when man was created. This is really the beginning of your action, right? So to understand this a little bit deeper, let's understand the aspect of kingship. Okay? Because God becomes crowned. And it says that Adam did that. the first day of created. He was created on Friday, and as soon as he was created, it says in the Midrash, it says that Adam, as soon as he was formed, he says, "Bo nishtachave v'nichra." Let us bow down and prostrate ourselves to Hashem our Lord. Now, what happened? It says that all the animals saw Adam, and they were mesmerized by Adam's beauty, by Adam's holiness. Because it says that Adam was shining, and it says he was so. Now the Midrash says that he was so tall that he was actually able to dim the sun because of his height, and that, of course, is not just on a literal level, on a spiritual level. It means that he was so spiritual, and he was so like holy. He was like formed, so to speak, by God, that he was like a complete spiritual being, right? In all of his aspects. So the animals saw this spiritual being walking on earth, and they saw him, and they bowed down to him. So Adam says, and King David sings this, he says, "Don't bow down in front of me. Bo nishtachave, let us bow down in front of our Lord, our God. Bo nishtachave lifnei Hashem osenu. Let's bow down before Hashem, who created all of us, including me. God created me just like he created you. So let's all bow down." So he caused all of creation to also bow down. And it's explained that by doing that, Adam retroactively caused the creation to be realized. Not just when he was created, but at the inception of creation, it was then kind of like it was transformed, because we know that there's a concept of a retroactive transformation, and this is actually called tshuva. Tshuva is a loosely expressed as repentance, right, or return. But that doesn't do it really justice, because only the Hebrew word really captures it. But teshuva means to return back to the source, to the core of where the person came from. So by causing all of creation to bow down, what Adam essentially did is he caused all of creation to do, sort of speak, a sense of tshuva. And by retroactively realizing that the whole purpose of creation was really the service of God, there became a retroactive fixing in the creation of the world, including the 25th day of creation. So the 25th day of creation becomes nullified and secondary to the creation of man, because the truth is that is the true creation of the world, because the creation of the world was now transformed to the state of its truest, highest form. So there's the concept of crowning, so to speak, which means realization of the source, of the core of everything. So to understand this, let's delve a little bit deeper into this concept of kingship, because the whole Rosh Hashana kind of like revolves around this concept of kingship. So it's quite a complex subject, if I may say so. It's a very complex subject, and there's a tremendous amount, basically the whole Rosh Hashana service and customs and the blowing of the shofar, all really, and it's not just Rosh Hashanah, but actually Yom Kippur as well, and Sukkot, are all about building up what is called Kabbalistically, building up the structure of Malchus, the structure of kingship in the world. That's what we're doing. We're building up the structure of kingship. So to understand this, why is it specifically that we say that kingship is where all all of creation was created from, and not, let's say, one of the other sfirot, such as chesed, because it says the world was actually created through chesed. Gevura. The world was created actually through all of these modes, which is, the Zohar says that Sheshes Yamim, that in 6 days God created the world. It should say Shisha Yamim. Why say Sheshes Yamim? So the Zohar says that through this 6 sfirot, the world was created. And then there was the final expression in Malchus, in kingship. So to understand this concept of kingship, and how does it differ from the other 6 sfirot, because the 7th one is Malchus, right? So the first 6 are the proactive days, but then the expressive day, the actual expression is on the 7th day, where God rests, and there's kind of like a recreation, and it goes back to pre-first day, right? Because before creation, there was Malchus, and 6 days we are creating, and then the 7th day, we go back to the pre-creation of the world, which is actually the Sabbath, the Shabbat, which is the reason why we rest. We kind of like re-synergize with this energy of pre-creation, and with that we take within us the ability to now create again during the next 6 days. So every Saturday, every Shabbat, we reconnect to that pre-world, to that Gan Eden Mikeden, to that place of paradise before, right, really before the sin of Adam, and really before there was any sort of negativity. So it's explained that kingship is rooted in a very high place, and it's rooted Kabbalistically. It's rooted in a place that is called Resha de lo Isyada, and it's called a Radla. Radla is a very high Kabbalistic sphere, which means the head which is not known. Radla means the head which is not known. And why is it called that? Because we have, prior to the creation of the 6 emotional levels, right, we have the 3 heads which are known, and they are Chochmah, Bina, and Das. They are intelligence, understanding, and wisdom, which are known, right? Although intelligence, Chochmah, comes from a place of nothingness, right? It comes from beyondness. It's still expressed within mind. It's beyond mind, but it's within mind. And then understanding obviously is mind, and then Das, and then wisdom is the expression of those 2, and that births the six emotional spheres. But then beyond that, there's the level of Resha de lo Isyada. There's the head which is not known. De lo yada velo isyada, that is not known, and that it doesn't even know itself. Now, what does that mean? So the difference between the Sfirot and Malchus is that the Sfirot are all about expression, but that expression needs the difference between Malchus versus the other Sfirot is that the other Sfirot don't need anybody else or anything outside of itself. In other words, it's an expression, but it's an expression of just a proactive expression. So chesed, for example, kindness is an expression which, regardless of who's taking my kindness, the person who's exhibiting, who's giving over that kindness could just bestow. Gvura, strictness, the person could just be a disciplined, a strict, a strong personality, regardless of who else is there, right? And it's like that with each one of the emanations. That, I'm sorry?
When you mix them, in the count of the Omer, for example?
Right, so when you mix them, you mean in but it's still, you're right, so mixing them brings it together. Let's leave that. It's a good question. 1 second, we'll get to that in a sec. But the difference between the Sfirot and Malchus is that Malchus is all about someone else. It's right, because you can't have a king that is a king over themselves. I mean, you probably have many of those, but they're in sight boards at this point, and they're kings, and they're all types of very, very important people, but nobody knows about it. So, but you're only actually a king if you have people that you're a king over, right? You can't go to a desert island and say, well, I'm a king over all these animals. You're not a king over the animals because they're not human. You could only be a king over people that are like you. You could be only be a king over a nation, over a right people, right? That's what a king is, right?
So the question is like Hashem's people.
So right, so yeah. 1 second, yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah, no.
What are the Sfirot?
Yes, so the Sfirot are called the emanations, and they are the modes of how God expresses himself in the world. Okay? Whereas prior to creation, God is called the infinite, he's called the Ein Sof, he's called the endless, and we have no way of latching on and having a connection to infinity. So God, in a sense, expresses himself, right, and defines himself via the Sfirot. And the Sfirot actually mean countings. That's Sfirot. It means to count. In Hebrew, lispor means to count, because when you're counting, you're saying this is 1, and that's now 2. So it's defined. So too, this mode of connection is defined. So it's chesed. So it's not infinite anymore, right? It's now something which is finite, which a person could have a relationship with, and we're taught in Kabbalah that the world was created through the Sfirot. Right, through a condensation. There was a major condensation where God's light was held back, and God's infinity now made space. And this is kind of like the concept of the Big Bang Theory, according to Kabbalah, is that God's infinity kind of like held everything back. And this is called the tzimtzum. It's called like this condensation. And then afterwards, there was an expression within the finite, within a limited space, which, so to speak, now does not know him, but is obviously him because everything was created by him. But God, in a sense, removed himself from being completely infinite to form finite. And the whole reason, and by the way, Kabbalistically, that idea is that point of creation, the beginning point of creation, actually that has within it everything, every aspect of creation, from the highest point, which is God's infusement of a ray of his infinity that's now coming within finite to all the levels of finiteness. So we have the expression kind of like the head and the feet. That is called, in Kabbalah, that's called primordial man. That's called Adam Kadmon, primordial man. So according to Kabbalah, the Kabbalist, let's say, that is learning, that is studying the creation of man, is not just understanding it on a literal level, that this is now the creation of man, but it's now actually the creation of the primordial man, which is actually the fountain, and it's the source of all of the subsequent creation. And we actually have the 10 sefirot within our bodies, right? We have right brain, left brain in the center. We have. Why does God have to for us? And like we said before, why did God want to create the world? Why did God want to have this level of finiteness? Right? So he wanted to have this level of finiteness because he wanted to be expressed with more, or he had a desire, according to the Balatanya, to the Alter Rebbe. He wanted to be expressed within creation. So therefore, the only way that is possible for it to be expressed is through these modes, which is actually man. Actually, within us, we have this microcosm of the 10 sefirot within actually our physical body, but also within our spirits, within our neshama, within our souls. We also have the 10 sefirot within us. We have the 10 sefirot within our emotional makeup, right? And actually 10 sefirot within our, even in our faces. So it's really kind of like the DNA of creation, and specifically we have 7 days of the week because it represents the 7 sefirot, the 7 modes of creation. We have the 7 oceans, 7 continents, representing the 7 sefirot, right? Right, the 7 sefirot are the emotion, but then prior to that is the intelligence, which is called Chochmah, Bina, and Das, which is called intelligence, understanding, and wisdom. So all of that is prior to the birth, so to speak, of the 7 sefirot, which are more emotionally based. They're emotionally geared. No, well, it could, no. Actually, it says that God created many worlds beforehand, and really we're not, in Judaism, we're not against the concept of other alien worlds. There could be other alien worlds, but they're not the purpose of creation. So it could be that there are all types of ETs out there, riding on bikes. I don't know if you remember that. No. Those of us from the 80s. Yes, ET. So there could be extraterrestrials out there, but it's not about them, right? Because they're not really, doing it, So it's only us that are down here in this, in the physical world, in the challenges, in the right, and we have the merit of expressing, like, godliness, right, and manifesting, bringing out godliness within creation. So it's a very deep concept, and it's a very long concept, right, which is spoken about a lot in Kabbalistic and Hasidic sources. But I'd like to kind of like share the kind of like the crux, the essence, maybe like the pulverize, just kind of bring out this point all together. So each one of the sefirot, each one of the emanations could be or is about itself rather than the other. It could be about the self, right? The chesed, the kindness is directed in one way, the gevura is in another way, etc. But kingship, the 7th sefirah, is all about the something else. So the something else represents the idea of rulership and of connection to creation. So the world was created through the sphera of Malchus. It came about through all the sphera, but it was emanated through that sphere of Malchus, through the seventh sphere of Malchus, because it's only through the seventh sphere of Malchus that there's room for that there's room for creation. Because the truth is that even through the finite sphirot, there could still be it's still, in a sense, infinite, because they're expressing a reality which is an infinite kind of like emotion. And it's only the aspect of Malchut that now makes room for the other, for something else, or takes into consideration that there is something else beyond itself, and therefore takes this almost like leap, which is like this idea of the Big Bang, that now that there's like this leap for creation, and now the world could be created on a spiritual basis, right? And on a physical basis that comes as a result of the spiritual creation of the world. That can only be expressed through the sphera of Malchus, of kingship, because it's the only one that has to do with the other, with something else. So now, why is Malchus so important? Because it takes into account the other, but it also takes in all of the above sphero and unites the sphero within itself. And by uniting the sphero within itself, it now creates a bigger reality. A reality which is not about itself, it's about something else. And that answers your question regarding Sfirat HaOmer, that when we take the two spheres, we put them together, that could only be done really through, or properly done through the sphere of Malchus, which is able to like bring it in together. It's a deep class. It's not for now. When we get to sphere to that time, but it's not for now. But it's a good question. But now, what I wanted to say is that that is the reason why Malchus is actually connected to what we said before, the Reisha de lo Yada, to the head which is not known. That concept of the head which is not known, that actually goes even beyond Adam, that goes even beyond the concept of Chachma and intelligence, and it goes even beyond that. Malchus is rooted in that sphere, in that realm. The reason why it's rooted in that realm, because the head which is not known means that it doesn't know itself, that it's beyond itself. And the only sphere which is beyond itself, it's about others, is the sphere of Malchus, of kingship. So this is very significant for us to kind of like zone into, because on Rosh Hashana we crown God as king. And when we think about kingship, it's important to like, think a little bit deeper into the root of kingship, and where does really kingship come from. And there's this beautiful, this concept that we're talking over here, if we just kind of like picture it and maybe meditate upon that some point of the day of Rosh Hashanah, when we consider actually the creation of the world and its origin coming from Malchus, where it's kind of like Malchus, kind of like the reservoir that holds within it all of the all of this six sphirot, and it contains it all, and then it manifests, and then it creates. The root of all of that is this Resha de Lois Yada. It actually goes beyond creation. So by contemplating on Malchus, we actually are connected to the source of creation, and we recreate the world, or we're part of the recreation of the world by acknowledging that our roles in creation and where that actually stems from. So I'll just say that again, that by recognizing recognizing the point of creation, which is Malchus, is one level, but then recognizing where Malchus stems from, and it comes from a place of infinity in a sense. It comes from a place of really almost the highest point possible. So where we talk about God's kingship, that God's kingship actually originates in that place, in the Resha de Lois Yada. So for some of you that may seem like whoa, that's that's out there, and that's a very lofty and deep concept. But what does it mean for me? How is that gonna better or really change my Rosh Hashana? And the answer is that we actually can't understand Rosh Hashanah properly and fully understand Rosh Hashanah without understanding or without delving a little deeper into the concept of Malchus, of kingship. And when we delve into the concept of kingship, so we have to delve into the reason of creation, like we started off with. And what's the reason of creation? It's man. And what is the purpose of man? What is the purpose of our creation? So we go back to kind of like, we have to ask like the why questions. We have to ask actually the deeper questions, and you can keep asking, well, why is this? So then what? And then what? And when we get down to it, and we kind of like try to understand, well, what is the real source, and what is the real reason for creation? It's this place of kingship, which is expressed by us. So those deeper, more esoteric type of questions actually bring about much more of a concentrated type of a sort of speak of a modality, of a service, of a connection. We're much more conscious of this reality. Now, it's not something really that we're meant to or could concentrate or contemplate on the rest of the year, but on Rosh Hashanah, it's the time. Rosh Hashanah is a time that everything goes back to its source, and the world gets recreated again from the source of creation. So it's not just that the year becomes, it's the head of the year, or it's the head of the, the century or whatnot. It's really everything now becomes recreated from this source of recreation, and we're part of that recreation, and we play a focal point in that, in the reason for all this. So all of this really furthers and deepens our horizons and our perspective on this amazing day, on the really 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. That that really these 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, and by really zoning in on the importance of these 2 days, and not just making it not just wasting the day on maybe on nonsense things or nonsense talk, and God forbid maybe becoming upset and being being jealous or sad, or right, things like that. We should make a conscious effort to really just to really go a little bit beyond ourselves, because these 2 days have an effect for the entire year, because we're recreating our entire year. We're a part of that recreation, and by proactively kind of like plugging into that, we're active partners in this recreation process. And just like man was created, we're also created. We're also recreated. So yeah. So having said that, we have to remember at the state that it has to be done through joy. Joy really breaks all the boundaries, and we could, and obviously this is, deep thought, deep concepts, but the simplicity of acknowledging this, our sources, is really the greatest joy that a human being could have, is recognizing that actually we have such an important role in creation. We're a part of this creation. We're not just like, what's our life for? Eat, drink, and be merry, because tomorrow we're not going to be here anymore, right? We're actually we proactively help change the world, and the world becomes recreated during Rosh Hashanah and every single day. So the truth is that's the greatest joy that there could possibly be. So therefore, Rosh Hashanah it's an intense day. It's a day called the day of Din, the day of judgment, but it's a joyous day, and it's a day that we're supposed to feast, we're supposed to eat, we're supposed to drink, and we're supposed to utilize this day, because this is the day that we are coronating the king. So we're coronating the king, and you're a part of the kingdom. That's such a great thing. That's the greatest thing that there could possibly be. So therefore, it's important to do that through joy. Malchuso be'ratzon kiblu aleim. That we receive God. We receive this God's kingdom. We do that through joy. We have to do that through joy, and please God, our entire year should be filled with joy in everything that we do. And everything that we do should be expressed through joy, which actually breaks the boundaries of all finite obstacles and negativity. And I truly believe that this year is going to be a huge, very, very important year and I think everybody feels it. Everybody really feels it right now. There's, in Israel, just these past couple of days, there's been a crazy dust storm, which is just, hasn't happened in like 80 years or so. But it's just as an example. I mean, there's so many things going on, and it really, the world feels that there's like, we're in a sort of like a birth pain of something really, really great, really, really huge, which is going to happen. And I think that we're really sitting on the brink of something really amazing. So this year, this Rosh Hashanah, it's going to be a huge, very, very important Rosh Hashanah for each and every one of us. And may it be with joy. May it only be joyous things, a good life, a long life, a sweet new year.
Amen. And all of Israel.
For everybody, and for the entire world. It's just, we should see the ultimate reason of God's creation and
Amen.
and that we're certainly a part of, and hopefully that the whole world is going to be a part of in expressing godliness. And for example, what we're doing now, learning online, is part of that expression. We're using a computer. We're using the waves, the internet waves of sending out this message from over here from Tzfat. So it's like physicality is now known, and that's a huge thing. So every time that we do that, we're little by little making for God a dwelling place in this world and expressing for God the intention of why the world was created. So it should be a Shana Tova Masuka, a good sweet year for everybody,
Amen.
and only good things, and we should have it really, really down here in a revealed way. So Shana Tova Umetuka, everybody on Live Kabbalah, and everything in our personal lives. So,
God